They say a family wall tells a story. Ours told me, in 100 gilded rectangles, that I didn't exist. It happened on a Sunday that smelled like lemon oil, meatloaf, and the cedar that my mother pretended was heirloom but really came from a clearance warehouse off Route 1. She called, asking me, no, telling me, to come for dinner. A proper family evening, Ione, she said, and I took the 2-hour train from Penn Station to the town where the houses smiled with white fences and the dogs wore bandanas stitched with their surnames. I went because I always did, because routine is its own gravitational field. My mother's new house, a colonial with blue shutters and a front garden of obedient hydrangeas, had a hallway you could skate through in socks. At the end of it, the wall. Frames arranged in an intentional grid, as if someone had measured not just with a level but with breath and prayer. The glass caught light from the transom and scattered it in polite squares across the floor. There was my sister's wedding portrait, her veil a whisper of fog. There was my brother in a firefighter's jacket, jaw set like responsibility. There was my mother at 27, cheekbones like defiance, smiling at a man who was not my father. There were cousins, infants, school photos with cowlicks, a dog with his paw in a cast like a child pretending to be brave. And where my face should have been? Nothing. A space that wasn't blank so much as deliberately occupied by air. New frames, my mother said, sweeping in behind me with that tone she used when we were children and she wanted us to be impressed. Don't they look marvelous? Symmetry is so calming. Gareth, her second husband, whose shirts never fit right across the shoulders, kissed my temple and called me kiddo. I have never been a kiddo. The word landed on me like a sticker that won't quite adhere. They're very, thorough, I said, keeping my voice steady. I could hear the dining room clock, a brass pendulum ticking against the polite silence. Thorough, my sister Blythe repeated, materializing at my elbow. She'd named her youngest after a West Elm sofa. That's Ione for obsessive, she laughed, and then, as if noticing the shape my mouth was making, moved on to discuss napkin rings. The absence wasn't an oversight. It had the precise edges of a decision. I took a step closer, the lemon oil from the frames lifting into my nose like a scent from childhood. My reflection warbled across the glass. Dark hair in a twist, a freckle at my jaw that I'd always disliked, a mouth trained into neutrality. I imagined myself as a ghost in each rectangle, a rumor of a person. My mother noticed me noticing. Of course she did. Oh, she said lightly, as if remembering an errand. Your photos were all, artsy, cropped. Too moody for the wall. I'll dig up a proper one later. A proper one. I had photographed weddings and storefronts and a senator's campaign stop. I had been paid to coax a governor into looking human. But for the wall, I was an error in exposure. In the dining room, the table glowed with candlesticks. Fake wax, real flame. I sat. I ate. I spoke when spoken to. The meatloaf tasted like my grandmother's recipe and a little like ash. Blythe told a story about her toddler and a jar of glitter that ended with laughter like a weather report. Gareth described something about municipal bonds? My brother Quinn showed a video of a fire safety demonstration where a dummy collapsed in a plume of smoke, and everyone applauded as if it were theater. The dog, patched back to health, put his head on my knee like an apology. No one asked about my latest series, the one that had quietly sold out at a pop-up in the Lower East Side. No one asked about the book of small-town storefronts that a university press had offered to publish if I could raise a little toward printing costs. No one asked whether I was happy. Happiness isn't data you can hang. I did the dishes with Blythe while our mother spoke on the phone in the other room about an HOA dispute, as if she were litigating a war. Water ran over the plates like a film reel. Blythe's nail polish was the pale pink of expensive innocence. You okay? She said, her voice lowered to a sisterly register I didn't recognize anymore. I'm fine, I said. Symmetry is calming. She flicked water at me, reflexive, just like when we were children at the sink in the old apartment. For a second, we were not women with mortgages and grudges. We were two girls in a kitchen that smelled like detergent and the last 10 minutes of Sunday. Then, my mother swept back in and said, Ione, don't forget to take some leftovers. You always forget. You're so stormy these days. She said it fondly, like a compliment for a trait she had no intention of letting me outgrow. On the train back to the city, the windows smeared the night into bands of gray. I watched my reflection and tried to find something that looked like symmetry. I found a woman who could frame a building so it confessed its secrets. I found hands that knew the patience of dark rooms, the courting of prince. I found a mouth that wanted to say, I am not an accident. The idea lands like a penny in a fountain. Small, loud, making a circle on the surface. I didn't want to be on their wall. That wasn't the point. I wanted to build my own wall, one they couldn't rearrange when guests came over, one that didn't require my mother's verdict on what counted as proper. By the time Penn Station spat me into the human underground air, the idea had legs and a pulse. I walked it up 7th Avenue and across to my apartment in Chelsea, a rent-stabilized miracle with floors that spoke at night and a window that faced a brick wall I'd come to love the way you love a face you've memorized. I fed myself toast and blueberries and sat with my laptop, the cursor blinking like a metronome for courage. The email I wrote to Mrs. Veraldi, who rented dusty storefronts to people with dreams, was simple. Do you still have the vacant space on Orchard? I'd like to take it for a month. 10 days for installation and soft openings, 1 for a show. Tight budget, tight timeline. I can pay first and last. I can make it matter. Her reply came at 1:13 a.m. Come tomorrow at 9, bring coffee and cash, we'll talk. I slept badly and woke early, the city in that hushed mode where even pigeons hold their breath. At 8:59 a.m., I was outside 21 Orchard, a narrow space between a barber shop that smelled like talc and a deli that smelled like everything. The metal grate rasped up, and there she was, a woman in her 60s with hair the color of a thundercloud and shoes that said she didn't like to waste time. You're punctual, she said. Good. Step inside. The space was a rectangle with a pocked concrete floor, a high ceiling, and a back room that could hide a small army. Dust floated like tiny planets in the morning sun. It was perfect in the way a blank page is perfect. Rent is a number you will not like, she said, naming it. It was a number I did not like. My savings were a soft pile, not a fortress. I can make a down payment now. And I did, peeling off bills I'd saved from assignments that had felt like miracles at the time. Shooting for a tiny magazine, doing portraits for a soap maker whose eyes had been so clear I couldn't stop thinking about them. And I'll owe you the rest by the opening.
What is the opening? She asked. What are you doing in here? I'm building a wall, I said, for people who were left off one. I told her about the way absence can be louder than presence, how the frame makes a promise that sometimes becomes a threat. I told her I wanted to hang truths that were curated out of view, text messages, receipts with somebody's name blacked out except the part that matters, a photo with the corner torn off where a person used to be. Not to humiliate anyone, to insist, gently but with light, on what is. She nodded once, like a judge. You'll need insurance. I have it, I lied. I did not. I could get it. I scribbled it in a notebook as if the word would transubstantiate into a policy. And you'll need a name, she said, looking at the walls as if reading ahead. A gallery needs a name even if it lasts one night. I thought of the gilded frames at my mother's. I thought of the lemon oil and the glossy quiet, and of how sometimes you have to use the materials of your exile to build your home. Guilt, I said, with an I. She smiled as if the pun had paid her. Keys by Thursday. There's a flicker in the backlights, but if you don't touch them with your hands and you speak kindly to them, they'll behave. I left with a key and a list and a pulse so visible I could feel it in my teeth. Outside, the deli guy handed me a coffee without asking what I wanted. On the house for the gallery lady, he said, and my throat thickened at the kindness of strangers who guessed before I announced. Back home, I called Rafa. He's a framer with hands like scaffolding and a laugh that makes pigeons consider dancing. We'd met when I'd brought him a box of antique frames I'd found at a church sale and asked if he could make them safe for modern walls. I want gold, I told him, pacing, but not new, not the smiley kind, the kind that remembers a different life. A little chipped, a little arrogant, and I need them cheap. Define cheap, he said. Painful, but survivable. He blew out a breath. I know a prop house in Long Island City that's clearing inventory. Come tonight. Bring a truck if you can beg one. Also, Ione, I like your voice right now. It sounds like you're building a ship. By 6, I was in a borrowed van that smelled like drywall and compromise. Rafa led me through aisles of opulence, the kind of frames used to trick a camera into thinking money had been in the room. We stacked 34 frames, each with its own gossip of scratches, each heavy enough to make me think about muscle tone for the first time in weeks. At the register, I watched my bank balance shrink to a plateau that would not support a picnic. I paid anyway because sometimes you have to go broke in the currency of fear before the thing will let you in. Back at 212 Orchard, we laid the frames against the wall and sat on the dusty floor, eating deli sandwiches wrapped in paper that reminded me of hospital gowns. Useful, modest, necessary. "What are you going to hang in them?" Rafa asked, not as a test, but as a blessing. "I'm going to make a wall that looks like a family's pride, and then I'm going to let it tell the truth." He nodded. "You're going to make some people upset." "I'm going to make myself visible," I said. "If they get upset, that's noise. I'm after signal." The next morning, I wrote titles on index cards in pencil because pen felt presumptuous. Mortgage receipt May 2012, signed by everyone except her. Text thread. Let's not tell Ione until after. 4 screens, timestamps, preserved. Note from guidance counselor, never sent. Photo of a photo, the cropped shoulder. Email. Subject line, family list for Christmas. Attachment size, 0 KB. I reached out to Anika, a lawyer who runs on iced coffee and righteous fury. We had become friends on a pro bono project documenting evictions for tenants' rights. She called me Lens, and I called her Claws. I told her the concept and waited for her to talk me out of it. "You'll need releases," she said, "or you'll need to redact like the CIA. Names, addresses, anything that identifies a private person not already a public figure. You can tell a story without punishing a civilian. Also, truth is a defense. Print what you can prove." "I can prove everything," I said. And then, softer, less warrior. "Almost." "Almost is where trouble lives," she said, but her mouth curved. "Send me the layouts before you print. I'll mark them up." I asked a print shop for a quote and flinched. I asked a different one and flinched less. I made a spreadsheet that looked like a recipe for a nervous breakdown. Frames, glass, museum gel, wire, nails, lights, wall vinyl, refreshments because art requires sugar, a stipend for Iris, the student I'd asked to help manage the door, cleaners because dust is its own opinion. In the afternoons, I stood in the gallery alone with the frames and played with light. I learned quickly which bulbs turned skin into milk and which turned it into language. I kept the back door open to let Orchard Street enter me. A saxophone from a third-floor window, a pair of teens arguing about whether a jacket was vintage or just tired, the deli bell marking time like a metronome for real life. When I sent the first round of redacted pieces to Anika, she called me back immediately. She said, "You're nervous." I said, "I'm alive, same thing lately." We went line by line. She taught me what a name is in the law. Not the sound your mother calls down a hallway, but a bundle of identifiers, a phone number, an email address, a street that could point to a place. I stripped the records until they felt like bones, and then I gave them light, so they became more than skeletons. I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in recognition. On the 3rd day, my cousin Tamsin texted, a ping at the exact moment the deli bell chimed. "What's this I hear about you doing a show about us?" she wrote. "Who told you?" I wrote. The red dot pulsed while she typed her answer. She sent, "Blythe. Group chat. Mom says it's tacky to monetize family drama. I said I'd like to buy tickets." I wrote, "It's free." And then, because I hadn't let myself say it to anyone else, "It's not about you." She replied with a heart, the kind that looks less like affection and more like cursory solidarity. By the end of the week, my apartment held stacks of prints and a living room that looked like a staging area for a quiet revolution. I taped my statement to the wall and read it out loud until it stopped sounding like text and started sounding like breath. This is what it said. Guilt is for anyone who has stood in a room curated to contain them and found themselves edited out. It is for those who have been asked to be grateful for symmetry while being concealed by it. It is not a tribunal. It is a mirror that refuses to flatter. Every artifact here is true, as far as documents and memory can make truth. Names have been removed to spare the innocent and the ordinary. The guilty do not need to be named. The light knows them by posture. This is a wall of presence where absence insisted on being the story. I sent it to Anika. She wrote back, "Keep it. Add one sentence. If you recognize yourself, sit with why." Rafa came to help hang. He measured like a hymn. Iris swept the floor as if dust was a personal insult. I painted the wall a white so stern it scared away shadows. When we stood back, the room changed. It felt bigger. It felt like a chest open to let a heart out. We installed the grid, a family wall that wasn't. The gold frames winked as if they were in on the joke. People wandered in off the street while we worked, asked what it was, and promised to come back for the opening. A woman with a baby tied to her chest stood and read a redacted email out loud as if it were a koum, then whispered yes to no one in particular. A teenager wearing a backpack heavy with future looked at the text thread and said, "My name is always left off the plan." I made a sign-up sheet for an email list. I made postcards with the show's title in embossed letters like a bruise trying to heal. I set up a donation jar that said, "If the truth feels like a tip, leave one." I told myself that if 5 people came, I'd have done something. If 50 came, I'd breathe differently forever. 2 days before the opening, my mother called. Caller ID, home, as if the label could erase how far it felt. "Ione," she said, the vowels like porcelain. "Blythe says you're doing an art show about us. Why would you air personal matters? It's unseemly." I said, "It's about me, and it's not unseemly to be seen."
"Well," she said, "good families don't talk about everything." "We're a family that talks about napkin rings and the price of mulch," I said, and my voice broke its long truce with softness. "We never talk about why the wall has holes shaped like me." There was a pause in which I could hear her decide whether to be injured or angry. She chose injured. "You know I love you," she said. "You know I just want harmony." "Harmony isn't when the violin is silent," I said. "It's when it's allowed to play." "Don't be dramatic," she said. The line clicked, a dial tone that sounded like 2 people walking away. I took the phone and put it face down. I put my face up and let 4 tears have their way. I do not like to cry in galleries. The walls get jealous. The morning of the opening, the city woke up glittering and guilty. Trucks hissed. Dogs made confessions to trees. I arrived at Guilt early to say hello to the light. Iris had already arranged the wine and the seltzer and the bowl of almonds that would, by night's end, look like an archaeological site. Rafa adjusted a frame by the width of 1 fingernail and made the entire wall exhale. At noon, a courier arrived with a padded envelope addressed to me in block letters that felt both careful and urgent. No return address. Inside, a stack of Polaroids and a USB drive in a bag that said LAB. The Polaroids were high gloss, the kind you shake even though you don't need to. On the first, my mother at a picnic table in 1998, making a face I recognize as the beginning of a decision. On the second, My father, not dead yet, holding a baby whose identity I did not know. Breath left me in a way that had nothing to do with drama and everything to do with oxygen. I slid the USB into my laptop. A video opened, a living room with floral curtains and a date stamp that would, if accurate, rewrite our calendar. There was audio. There were voices. There was a sentence said by a person I had trusted that knocked a shelf in my chest and sent everything arranged there into a new pattern. I couldn't show it. Not yet. Not without talking to Anika. Not without verifying what I already felt could be true. But the Polaroids, I could hang those. Not as an accusation, as context, as weather. Rafa came up behind me. You look like someone took a frame off the wall and behind it was a safe. Something like that, I said. Help me with one last thing. We hung a frame in the center of the grid, bigger than the rest. The space had been empty by design, the way a breath before an answer is necessary. Inside, I placed a single sentence laminated against touch. Every family has a wall. This one is mine. And under the frame, on a pedestal, I placed a glass box with a velvet bottom. I put the Polaroids inside, face down, with a card that said, "Turn them when you are ready." At 5, doors open. People start to come. Not 5, not 50. Within half an hour, the room is body warm. The frames flirt with their reflections. The redacted text throbs with its own pulse. I stand near the back, invisible by choice, and watch a woman in a navy dress put a hand to her mouth while reading, "Let's not tell Ione until after." I watch a man in a corduroy jacket wipe his eye at the guidance counselor's unsent note, then write something in the guest book that made the paper bruise. 5:30, a blog writer appears, the kind who can collapse a show with a snarky adjective, or build it with a single praise about urgency. He nods at me as if we are conspirators. Ions of anxiety in my blood turn to something brighter. At 6, the deli guy comes, still in his apron, and stands like a bodyguard at the Polaroid pedestal, giving people space while letting them know there are eyes here that will be kind. At 6:30, Blythe walks in with a scarf like a verdict. Quinn follows, his firefighter stance softened by the civilian clothes. My mother enters last, as if waiting for someone to announce her by name. Gareth has a face like a man who suspects a bill will follow joy. Tamsin is with them, eyes on me, like a lighthouse that can't help itself. Conversation shifts when they enter. It always has. Families are weather systems. You take out an umbrella even if the sun is shining. Blythe kisses me on the cheek. Air touching air. Quinn hugs me like a brother who has practiced being gentler than the world taught him. My mother touches my hair, a gesture she thinks is neutral, and I experience as editing. "You've done a lot," she said, looking at the wall as if it might be contagious. "It took longer than you think. Not to make, to admit." She tilts ahead. "We'll discuss later." Gareth clears his throat in the way that means something official is about to be said. "Is there somewhere we can talk?" Everything we need to say is on the walls. And then immediately hate myself for the line, because it sounds like television, and because it is true. People move through the room the way fish move through a current. They stop in front of the Polaroid pedestal and read the card. Some turn the photos, some don't. When my mother gets there, she doesn't. She looks at the glass box as if it has an opinion about her dress. Anika arrives, her hair up, her eyes sharper than good scissors. "I'm here in case anyone says the word injunction," she whispers. "Has anyone said the word injunction?" Not yet, but the night is young, and so are our appetites for drama. At 7, I tap the side of my glass with a nail. The sound makes a small order out of the room's hum. "Thank you for coming," I say, and the words sound like a mouth learning to sing. This show is called Guilt, and it is about what we frame and what we refuse to frame. It is not about vengeance. It is about light. I hope it meets you where you've been waiting. Applause is a soft storm. I stand there and take it, not like a trophy, but like rain. My mother does not clap. Blythe claps with her fingers below shoulder height so as not to disturb her necklace.
Quinn claps with his whole body, the way he does most things. A man at the back raises his hand as if this is a town hall. What made you do this? A wall that forgot me. And I let the truth be simple. Because simple can still be a blade. Another hand. What would you say to your family? I look at them. Blythe is a painting I could identify by brushstroke. Quinn is a photograph I took when I was 15 and never developed. My mother is a mirror that has never stopped trying to teach me how to stand. I would say, I begin, and then the door opens and a man in a charcoal suit steps in with a cop at his elbow and a packet of papers in his hand. Anika steps forward, like a dancer entering her number. Evening, she says, smiling the kind of smile that makes paperwork nervous. The man clears his throat and reads with the confidence of someone who has practiced being heard. Temporary restraining order, request for immediate cessation of exhibition, pending review of defamatory content against private individuals of good standing. He looks up, scans the faces as if searching for the guilty. His eyes land on my mother and soften. His eyes land on me and do not. The room pulls back, a tide shocked by the moon. Some people step closer to the frames as if proximity to art could shield them from law. My chest tightens, but not with fear, with something adjacent, Resolute's older cousin. Anika lifts her chin. On what grounds, she asks, as if that isn't printed on the top sheet. And who is the complainant? The man clears his throat again, as if summoning proof with sound. Parties wish to remain unnamed to public where possible. He tries to hand the papers to me. I don't take them. He tries to hand them to Anika. She does, delicately, as if taking a photo by its edges. Thank you, she says. We'll respond in due course. Meanwhile, this order has not been signed by a judge. She tilts it toward the overhead light. And until it is, this is a love letter to the concept of paperwork. The cop shifts, uncomfortable with the line between theater and authority. Rafa moves to my side without touching me, a moon I can feel. My mother finally steps to the Polaroid pedestal. She looks at the card. Turn them when you are ready. She turns the first one. Her mouth, which is usually an architecture of control, becomes a harbor with a storm warning. What is this? She asks. The word's thin, a piano wire. It's history, I say. It's a piece of our house you pretended was a missing tile. She turns the second Polaroid. The room narrows to the width of this moment. Blythe says my name, like an admonishment and a plea. Quinn says nothing, as if silence might make a bridge. My mother looks up at me. In her eyes, I can see the calculation I have lived under my entire life, the math of perception. She leans closer to the glass box, as if it might tell her something kinder if she is kind to it.
Anika's phone buzzes. She looks at it, then at me, then at the man in the suit. They're filing now, she says quietly. We've got maybe 20 minutes before someone tries to make this official. Then I need to make something else official first, I say. I step to the center frame, the one with the sentence that is both a confession and an invitation. I slip my thumbnail under the bottom of the frame and lift. Behind it, I've hidden one last piece, the envelope from the courier, the USB, the thing that will push the evening past the point of no return. Ione, Anika says, not as a lawyer, as a friend who has learned to use words like sandbags against floods. I know, I say. I know, but the room is watching, and my mother's lips are the color of disbelief, and the cop is looking out the window as if his body cannot bear complicity without a view. I break the seal on the envelope with the kind of care you give to delicate truces. I slide out the USB. I lift the black velvet cover of the Polaroid box, and with a hand that remembers every shutter I have ever pressed, place the USB on top, where everyone can see it and no one can touch it yet. This is the piece I was saving, I say, and my voice does not tremble. This is the space where the wall will tell you why it left me off in the first place. The room inhales. And from the doorway, as if called by name, a voice that sounds like a door I thought I'd locked says, "Don't you dare." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you,
please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you.
Don't you dare. The words clipped the air, hard-edged and unmistakable. Conversations went brittle. The gallery, my gallery, contracted to the width of the doorway where a man stood, as if he'd walked out of a portrait that had refused to hang. I knew him, despite never having been introduced. It wasn't just the jawline I'd seen once in a shoebox of contraband snapshots, or the way his hair refused to part as if neatness were only for the obedient. It was recognition the body keeps on a shelf marked, "Do not touch," and reaches for anyway. Silas Avery, the man my mother smiled at in the photo from 27, the man family lore filed under old friend, the man who seemed to have rented a permanent room in our family's subjunctive. My mother moved before I did. "Silas?" she said, performing composure, voice pitched halfway between hostess and hostage. "This is not your, it is exactly my," he said, stepping in, the cop at his shoulder, pretending he had come for the cheese cubes. Annika inserted herself into the negative space like a bookmark. "On what authority?" she asked, pleasant in the way a scalpel is pleasant to surgeons. She held the packet from the man in charcoal suit at a saintly angle under the track light. We were just admiring this enthusiastic fiction and waiting for a judge to put their ink where his mouth is. Silas didn't spare the paper a glance. His gaze stayed on me, dark eyes that learned their confidence from getting their way. "Ione," he said, and the sound of my name in his mouth threaded through me like a wire. "You don't want to do this." "What exactly is this?" I asked. It came out steady, which felt like theft from a trembling version of me. "Burn your house down to prove the stove is hot. There are other ways to make a point. I didn't bring matches, only light." The room breathed. Iris, by the seltzer, rubbed her thumb against the rim of a glass as if polishing an exit sign. Rafa stood beside me, arms folded in a geometry that read as both casual and garrison. The deli guy, apron and all, had wedged himself at a polite distance from the Polaroid pedestal, conspicuously ordinary, which is its own kind of protection. Quinn took a step forward, then reconsidered. Blythe tilted her chin like a hinge. Gareth produced a throat-clearing designed for small-town council meetings. Silas didn't look at any of them. "I will not allow my name to be dragged through a room with a donation jar," he said, evenly, as if he were discussing weather. "Then we're aligned," I said. "Your name isn't in the room." I gestured to the redactions. "Everyone's name is not in the room." His mouth tightened. "Don't be cute." He shifted, and a sliver of the doorway light etched his profile. He was older than the photographs and handsomer than the stories, which annoyed me in a way I only recognized later as grief for the ease he had always seemed to own. My mother finally found her breath and tried to hand it to the room as if it were hors d'oeuvres. "This is getting out of hand," she said. "We will talk about it as a family." That word hung there like tinsel and accusation. "What talk about?" I asked. "A wall that forgot a daughter, a date stamp that doesn't match the myth, the definition of proper?" The last word walked out of me wearing my mother's voice and my father's stubbornness. The man in charcoal suit, papers courier, hovered, eager to matter. The cop examined a track of paint on the floor with the attention of a man learning to exit a conversation he doesn't want to have. "Let's," Blythe said suddenly, "let's talk as a family, not with an audience, not with," she made a lazy circle of her finger that took in the frames, the people, the deli guy, the ghost of our grandmother's good silver. A woman near the center frame looked at me as if to ask whether she should be ashamed of being present. I wanted to tell her no, that witnesses are the only reason history doesn't gaslight us. Instead, I said, "We are talking as a family. We're doing it with the truth within arm's reach. That's the difference." Silas's eyes flicked to the glass box and the face-down squares inside it. "Put those away," he said. "Quiet. Quiet from a man like that is a siren." "No," I said.
quiet. Not a siren. A line. Annika spoke without looking away from him. If you want to protect your interests, Mr. Avery, her use of his name had the weight of a witness stand. You're free to file. Right now we're at a gallery opening where no one has identified you and nothing unlawful has occurred. He smiled at her, the way men with funding smile when they meet women with boundaries. You must be the lawyer, he said. I hope your retainer is paid. It is, I said, by me. It wasn't entirely true yet, but debt is a bridge you agree to cross before you see the other side. My mother, unable to bear being the object rather than the choreographer, moved toward the pedestal and read the card aloud as if she was hosting a game show. Turn them when you are ready. Her hand hovered over the first Polaroid like a small bird. She didn't turn it. She looked at me instead, as if asking me to play my part in our old theater of grace. I'm ready. Are you? She turned it. We had all been children in rooms where drama was always something to avert. Spills, tears, confessions. There is no rehearsal for the silence that follows a truth finally allowed to stand upright. On glossy paper, 19 years ago, my mother sat at a picnic table, plastic tablecloth printed with strawberries, the kind you wipe down and insist is clean. Her face had a crease I had never seen, not a wrinkle, but a decision. Her hair was pulled back so sharply it looked like it had lost. The angle of the light suggested late afternoon, the exact hour when you forget why you were mad and then remember. The date stamp, emblazoned in white in the bottom border, May 27th, 1998. A child's wobbly scrawl in blue ink. Across the back, someone had written on it and the marker bled through just enough to be readable from the front. Not a signature. A name. Delphine. My breath went sideways. Not because of the name. Names are costumes, you can change them. But because of the handwriting. I would have recognized it anywhere. It was my grandmother's, the looping D that looked like someone taking a bow. Quinn leaned in until his shoulder touched mine, a quiet anchor. I don't know that name, he said. A fact, uncluttered. And neither do I. She replied too fast, which is how lies break their ankles. Her eyes cut to Silas instinctively. He shook his head 1 millimeter. Don't. The second Polaroid was my father, the one who later died, sitting in the old living room with the floral curtains I had watched grow tired and then stop. He held a baby with a sour newborn mouth, a mouth I did not know. He had that look men have when they discover their own tenderness by accident. The date stamp in the corner matched the month we don't talk about, June 2nd, 1998. Who was that? Blythe asked, arms wrapped around her torso, in a posture that read as chic if you didn't know it was self-defense. Silas pinched the bridge of his nose as if bracing for a migraine named Consequence. This isn't the place, he said to my mother, low and fricative. It's the only place, I said. Everything else is a couch we vacuum. The man in charcoal had found a column to lean against and now examined his nails with interest. The cop looked at the ceiling as if someone had hung a sky there and forgot to paint the stars. Annika, who had the power to turn a room into a deposition by blinking, spoke into the space. Anyone who wants to step into the back room is welcome. Anyone who wants to stand here and be changed is also welcome. My mother's hand hovered over the third Polaroid. She didn't move. A tremor ran through her arm. Not dramatic, just human. She had never been good at being human when it wasn't on her schedule. She was magnificent at being an idea. Mom, Quinn said softly. Not mother. Not mother. This was the word we used when we needed something and thought she might give it. She lifted her chin and found the performance. Nothing, she said. Old photos. A silly name. We're letting a little art project turn into a mirror, I said. We're letting it turn into a mirror. Silas's jaw shifted again, that little half-inch of motion that told me everything about all the times he had won arguments by refusing to have them in public. Ione, he said, this drive, he gestured to the USB now resting on top of the velvet like a tiny polite bomb. Do you even know what's on it? I could have lied. I didn't. A video with a date stamp that asks our story to do math. And you're prepared to screen home videos for strangers? He asked, impervious to the correct use of the word screen for someone who prefers his myths curated. If the home video is a ledger and the strangers are witnesses. I picked up the drive. The room tightened. Annika touched my elbow, the smallest pressure. We should verify chain of custody before anything goes on a wall, she murmured. And if this is what I think it is, we need to be precise about redactions. And
I know, I said. My mouth was dry as if I'd swallowed a stack of old letters. But I also know what silence does when you feed it. My mother found steel. I forbid it, she said. Not dramatic. Final, like a tonic note held until the room adjusted its breathing. You will not play whatever thing that is. You don't get to forbid anything, I said, the words arriving before my diplomacy had a chance to stop them. You lost that when you edited me out of the wall. A ripple went through the crowd, the kind of raw private ache that makes you think you should look away until you realize looking away is the oldest violence. Enough, Gareth said, reaching for Stern. It looked rented on him. We are decent people. We're not tabloiding ourselves in front of, he waved a hand at the room, New York. At least you're finally including me with something, even if it's a city. Rafa's laugh was one exhale, an acknowledgement that humor was the handrail we were using to get down the stairs. Fine, Silas said. Not agreement. A cue. He turned to the man in charcoal. Call, he said, now. The man nodded and slipped out, phone already to his ear, a small god looking for a bigger one. The cop shifted again. Ma'am, he said to me, polite and Midwestern, a sound you trust until you remember what it's attached to. An hour is how long it takes to talk yourself out of a spine, I said. We're not doing that. I moved to the back where my laptop and the small projector were already set up for the slideshow of storefronts I had planned to play on a loop, an interlude of tenderness between harder pieces. The HDMI cable hung like a promise. I slid the USB in and waited while the machine performed its little ritual of not recognizing, then asking my permission as if it doubted my adulthood. Ione, Anika said, more like Ione this time? I'll stop if the first frame says I should, but if it says what I think it says, I'm not stopping, and if someone tries to stop me, they can climb over the frames. She sighed, the kind of exhale you give a friend who is walking toward the weather with her jacket open. Then I'm up front, she said, and moved, precise and calm, to stand between Silas and the projector like a librarian who knows exactly which books someone is trying to steal. I clicked. The video opened with a jitter and a view of one of our old living room corners I could find in the dark. The floral curtains, the plant that died every winter and resurrected every spring, the lamp with the pull chain that made a noise like a small bell if you liked it too hard. I heard voices before I saw faces. My father's, warm and worn at the edges even then. My mother's, sharp enough to slice a cake and pass you a perfect piece. Then another voice, quieter and more expensive. Silas. If sound had a cologne, his would have been cedar and entitlement. Is it recording? My father asked. The camera dipped and a giggle answered, someone younger, maybe the babysitter or a cousin I didn't know. The lens found the room again, centered not on a person but on an argument. And we do this now, my mother was saying, because later it will be worse. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at a stack of papers on the coffee table, the kind of legal forms that pretend to be neutral while rearranging your life in boxes. It's a correction, Silas's voice said. A private correction. We will move on. My father's hands entered the frame, flat on the table as if steadying it. I don't like this, he said. I'm not a man who... He stopped. He had always been good at stopping. He had thought it was a virtue. It's for the best, my mother said, and I could hear the future in her voice, the one where best is a tyrant. The camera shifted, and for a second the frame caught a bassinet I had never seen, a pale slip of a child. The infant made a sound that babies make when they are thinking about liking the world. The date stamp clicked on June 2nd, 1998, then flickered, then steadied. The babysitter, whoever it was, hummed a song I could not name, and that nevertheless made something under my breastbone ache with recognition.
My father looked up finally, toward the camera as if it was a person asking him to be brave. "We'll change the certificate," he said, and the words wobbled like a table on an uneven floor. "We'll align the dates." He made a face at the phrase, as he borrowed it. He turned to my mother. "Is this what you want?" She stared at the bassinet, not at him. "It's what keeps us resemblant," she said. "Not together, not honest, resemblant. A word I had to learn then and have complicated feelings about now." Silas entered the frame finally, 2 fingers on a document, tapping gently, the way men do when their confidence needs a metronome. "No one needs to know," he said, and smiled at my mother the way a croupier smiles when the house is winning. "We'll spare everyone." "What are we sparing?" my father asked, voice gone from warm to woolly. "Her or you?" "Both," Silas said, "and all of you." He looked up as if he'd sensed the lens and the future behind it. "If this ever comes up," he added, and laughed like a man who expects life to continue to be generous. "It won't." The video glitched, the image breaking into pastel squares and then returning, and in that sliver of lost frames I felt my childhood slip its leash and run. My mother leaned in, closed the folder with a decisiveness that felt permanent, and said, "We are a family." Her hand went to the bassinet. She did not touch the baby. She looked toward the camera then, directly, which she rarely did. "We will keep the wall tidy." Something in the room, the real room, made a sound I didn't know how to catalog. It wasn't a gasp. It wasn't applause. It was the sound truth makes when it finds air after too long under a rug. "What certificate?" Blythe asked, voice up a register. No one answered her because the video did. "The birth certificate," my mother said 19 years ago. "We move the day. We make it a line." "And the father's line?" Silas asked, too casual, one leg crossed elegantly over the other, in a way that looked preposterous near a bassinet. "We'll leave it as is." My father swallowed. You could hear it. "Leave it as is," he repeated, as if tasting the sentence and finding it sour. "All right." He said all right like a man opening his front door for a stranger and pretending not to mind the mud. The camera drifted, then landed briefly on the bassinet. The baby fussed. Someone's hand entered the frame and adjusted the blanket. A ring on the finger caught the light. Not my mother's, not my father's. A third hand. The manicured nails of a person I knew only later, my grandmother. "Well," she said off camera, "if we are doing this," her voice made doing sound like a chore she'd add to a list, "then we will not speak of it again." The tape cut there, a flash of blue, the end. Silence. Then the sound of the city threading itself through the door, the hiss of buses, a whistle, laughter from someone who did not know there are nights when you can see your life split like a pomegranate and you do not know which half to eat. My mother moved first, not toward me, toward the projector, as if she could put her hand over the lamp and make the light behave. Anika was quicker. She slid in, a dancer intercepting a clumsy partner, and held up a palm. "Don't," she said, quiet like the way I said no. Silas's face was a study of expensive distress. "Turn it off, Ione," he said. "This helps no one." "It helps me," I said. My voice surprised me by coming out unbroken. "I have spent years being edited out of rooms I was standing in. This makes me visible, whether you like it or not." Quinn scrubbed a hand over his mouth, the way men do when emotion itches and they mistake it for stubble. "What does any of that mean?" "Move the day. Why would you—" He looked at my mother. "Why would you do that?" "Because," she said, and stopped. She tried again, this time looking at the frames as if they could cue her lines. "Because when things line up, people are calmer. Because perception matters. Because there are children to think of." She meant them. She meant you too. She never had to say I when the house had learned to say it for her. Blythe's mouth became a ruined bow. "Are you saying—" She looked from me to the Polaroids to Silas. She put her hand to her chest as if checking for a necklace she had forgotten to wear. "Are you saying Dad isn't—" She didn't finish the sentence. Some sentences are cliffs. "No one is saying that," she said too quickly. "Nothing changes."
He flinched. Minuscule, a man unused to flinching in public. "I didn't know about the wall," he said, as if that produced absolution. Gareth cleared his throat, the third time in as many minutes, and found the courage men have when paperwork is in reach. "We should leave," he said to my mother. "We don't have to stand here and be performed on." He gestured at the crowd with a hand that had never done real harm and never done enough good. "You can leave," I said, "or you can stay and keep your eyes open." I looked around the room. That's an option for everyone, by the way. The door works both directions. No one moved. Even the blog writer had seated his notes and was standing like an altar boy who knows the incense is about to mean more than smell. "I burned it," Quinn said suddenly, so softly I almost didn't hear him. "When I was 17. A letter. In the garage. Mom asked me to take out the trash, and I saw a box under the paint cans with a label that just said old. There were hospital bands. One had your name, and another didn't. There were photos. Not these, different. I asked, and Mom said they were nothing. She said throw them away. I took one and went to the driveway, and I burned it." He looked at me. I thought I was being loyal. My mother made the smallest sound, a thing like a chip falling off porcelain. "You did what you knew to do," I said to Quinn, and meant it. His eyes went glassy, not with tears, but with the effort of holding them back. We are a family of holding back. Blythe looked like she'd been leaning against a wall that moved. "I thought," she said, "I thought our drama was just you being difficult and me being me." She laughed a small, stunned laugh. "Resemblant," she said. "God." The man in charcoal reappeared in the doorway, phone still in hand, his face arranged into something that tried to look like neutrality and failed. He made a beeline for Silas, whispered. Silas nodded. The man stepped forward, paper in his hand, like a fixed idea. "Signed," he said. "Judge on night duty." He lifted it, as if it were a winning ticket. "Immediate cessation pending hearing." He looked at me as if he were delivering a package he hoped would tip well. "Let me see," Anika said, and took it as if she were accepting communion she intended to argue with. She scanned, then exhaled through her nose. "We can challenge," she said to me quietly. "But if we ignore this, we make the next part worse." "What counts as cessation?" I asked. "Do I have to take the walls down? Or can I simply—" I gestured to the projector. "Turn off the light," she said, "for tonight." She met my eyes. "We will turn it back on again. Legally." Every cell in me wanted to reach for the stubbornness I have used like a crowbar my whole adult life. But stubbornness without strategy is just noise. And noise is what they hope for, because it lets you call you hysterical while they keep the lights. I nodded, walked to the projector. My fingers were steady. I pulled the plug, and the room did the thing rooms do when light changes. They recalibrate, and in the half second of recalibration, they decide who they are. The gallery settled into a softer brightness, the kind that makes gold frames look like they belong to a house and not a museum. People began to move again, slower now, as if their bones had been told a secret. Silas let out a breath I'd apparently been holding for him. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me. This isn't for you." The cop's posture relaxed, grateful to be a prop again. The man in charcoal tucked the signed order back into a folder like a magician pocketing a trick. "We'll go," my mother announced to no one and everyone, the way queens leave rooms in movies. "We will speak with you tomorrow, Ione. This is not finished." No,
It's not. My voice was calm. To my surprise, so was my heart. She moved past the Polaroid pedestal without looking down. Blythe followed, then Gareth. Quinn hesitated, then turned back and touched my shoulder once. A tap that said, "I see you," in a language we'd apparently learned without classes. Silas didn't move. Not immediately. He stood in front of the center frame, the one with the sentence, "Every family has a wall, this one is mine," and read it as if it were an exam. When he finally looked at me, his face was not a mask, and that, more than anything, undid me. "I don't know how to do this," he said. Plain. True. I know how to do all the wrong things. I know how to sign forms and write checks and vanish. I don't know how to stand still and be seen. You practice, like anything. I put the USB back in its envelope and sealed it. "Do I have your permission to stay?" he asked. The version of me that is always 15 said no out of habit. The version of me that hung these frames said yes, because light is a muscle, and I wanted mine to be strong. "If you can stand without blocking anyone's view," I said. He laughed, finally, and it made a crease at the corner of his eye that I recognized as a geography I had inherited without permission. By 9, the crowd thinned. The blog writer shook my hand and said a string of words that sounded like a review trying not to confess it had cried. Iris brought me water because she knows wine is a liar. Rafa started collecting empty cups and stacking them like evidence that people had been here and consumed something and left altered. I stood by the guest book and read entries tilted left and right in careful cursive and chaotic print. Thank you. I thought it was just me. I'm sorry. Me too. Light, light, light. When the last stranger left, and the deli guy waved from the sidewalk and went back to his world where truth is measured in thin slices and handed across counters, I locked the door. The gallery exhaled. The frames gleamed like a choir catching its breath after a particularly honest hymn. Anika sat on the floor, back against the wall, ankles crossed. "We'll file first thing," she said. "We'll argue truth, public interest, and that you did not identify anyone. We'll argue that they did." She smiled up at me. "You did good." "Did I?" I asked. Doubt dripped in, late to the party but still determined to make an entrance. "You didn't lie," she said. "That is not nothing." Rafa switched off racks row by row until only the front bank glowed, the city's evening folding itself into our room. "Want me to stay?" he asked. "I'm okay." And I was, in the way you are okay after a surgery where they found what was making you sick and showed it to you in a jar. He kissed the top of my head as if he were my older brother from a universe where I got one of those. Call if the lights talk back. Iris hugged me with intensity I will always be grateful for in 20-year-olds. "You were brave," she said. I took a photo of the crowd at peak gasp. "Do you want it?" "Send it to the gallery email. I'll make a folder called Oxygen." They left. I turned the sign to closed. The street kept being a street. The wall kept being a wall. I stood alone in the middle of the room I had invented and felt more present than I had in years. The envelope, USB returned to its sleeping place, sat on a pedestal like a sleeping animal. I took it and slid it into the safe I had bolted to the back room floor because Anika had told me to act like a grown-up who had learned from other grown-ups' mistakes. I spun the dial
and listened to the tumblers make their quiet decisions. The door knocked. I froze. Not fear. Calculation. It was late enough that knocking was an event. Through the glass I could see only a shape, backlit by Orchard Street. Someone neither particularly tall nor threatening in outline. I went to the door and cracked it. "Hi," she said. A woman about my age, maybe younger, hair.
"Yes," I said. My voice did the curious thing it does when the body understands more than the mind, softened itself as if greeting a relative at a funeral. "Can I help you?" She looked down at the towel as if confirming it still existed, then back at me. "I'm sorry to come late," she said. "I didn't know if I should." She laughed nervously. "I didn't know anything, actually, until about 3 hours ago when my neighbor sent me a link to a blog that said there was a show about family walls." She swallowed. "I've lived 20 miles from this street my whole life and never been on it until now." She took a breath like a diver before the first plunge. "My name is Delphine." The world tilted. A polite degree at first, then more, as if deciding 12 degrees wasn't going to get the job done. I opened the door the rest of the way without remembering telling my hand to do that. She stepped in, and the light caught her face and rearranged my memories into a configuration that made new sense and hurt. Her nose was not my mother's, her mouth was not mine, but the set of her eyes, steady, curious, refusing to apologize, was a photograph I've had taken in a mirror without knowing. "I think," she said, clutching the towel-wrapped thing like a lifeboat, "I am on your wall." She unwrapped the towel. Inside was a wooden frame, cheap and earnest, holding a school photo of a girl with a bowl haircut and a smile that had trained itself to be appropriate. Taped to the back, a yellowed index card with my grandmother's L. A date, a note, a word underlined twice. Keystone. "What is that?" I asked, though I already loved it and hated it because that's what truth is like in families. It arrives with hands full and asks where to sit. "My mom kept it," she said. "My other mom." The sentence knelt between us like a prayer willing to do push-ups. "I thought it was mine because she said it was. It was on a shelf. But the card..." She turned the frame over, and I read my grandmother's script. "Delphine, 1998, kept safe at Keystone. Do not destroy." "Keystone," I repeated, the words stepping out of memory, wearing a lanyard and a scent of bleach. "Your neighbor said your show." She gestured to the frames around us. "And then I saw the blog post with the name Guilt, and I felt my body do that thing it does when it sees a place it forgot it knew. So I thought maybe this belonged to you, or to the wall." She looked at me, and something in her face asked for permission to exist. Behind us, the frames glowed in their patient grid. The center one watched. The safe said nothing. I took the frame from her, and it felt both heavier and lighter than it should have. I held it up to the light, and the gold in the room did its work, and the cheap wood pretended to be grand, and it looked, for a moment, like a relic. "Do you know who I am?"
Me. The word snaps like thread, and for a breath, the crowd's noise recedes to a hush that makes Orchard Street sound like a radio tuned between stations. Blythe's hand shakes around the phone. Her hair, usually architecture, has collapsed into weather. "Play it," I say before my mother can vacuum the moment. The inspectors hover at my door like syntax, vests the color of caution. Annika angles herself between them and the glass with a smile that belongs on a courtroom sketch. Blythe looks at me as if asking whether the ground will hold. I nod. She swipes, finds the file. The screen shows my father's office. Wood paneling, the lamp with the dent, the plant I kept alive for a summer and then forgave for dying. He sits at his desk in a flannel shirt he wore when he wanted to convince the house that he was relaxed. The date stamp in the corner marks a winter afternoon, 2 months before his stroke. "Blythe," he says into the camera, voice warm like a sweater you don't have to earn. "If you're watching this, it's because I didn't get there in time to say it in person, or because I chickened out the last time we were alone in the car." He smiles at himself for telling the truth. "You're good at starting the music in any room. I'm good at pulling the plug when I panic. We've both got our gifts." He clears his throat, looks at notes just off screen. "Okay, the wall." Beside me, my mother's jaw sets to an angle that could slice bread. Silas stands very still, as if movement might wake something he can't soothe. Delphine's fingers find mine, a new instinct neither of us is good at pretending we don't have. "I wasn't a brave man," he says, roughened by the admission. "But I wasn't a liar either. Not at first. Then the trust came with its rules, household children of record, and your grandmother and your mother, and that man," he doesn't say Silas, he doesn't have to, "decided to make things align so we could keep a roof and keep peace. Align." He makes a face like the word tastes like pennies. "I went along. I signed where they told me. I told myself I was protecting everyone. Maybe I was protecting my fear. Maybe I was protecting the wall." Blythe's breath catches. The phone trembles. Annika, without looking away from the inspectors, presses her palm briefly to Blythe's elbow to steady the angle. "You were a teenager," he continues, and his face softens at memory we can't see. "You didn't invent the rules. You enforced them because we told you enforcing them was love. If you took down your sister's pictures when you were 14 and I stood there and said nothing..." His voice falters. "That's on me, not on you." A collective intake of breath moves through the crowd, a tide acknowledging the moon. "You need to know 2 things," he says, leaning in as if the camera were a confessor. "One, I kept a ledger. Not the money, that was your grandmother's sport. I kept a ledger of decisions. I put an envelope in my desk labeled Keystone because I knew one day the truth would slosh out of the containers we built. 2, if you ever see Delphine standing next to Ione, tell them what I was too cowardly to say. They were born the same hour." He laughs, a small, astonished sound, as if he's telling a story on himself. "Sisters are a kind of gravity. We pretended that physics didn't apply to our house. Turns out it does." The video ends not with a flourish, but with my father reaching to turn off the camera and knocking it slightly so that the last image is the lamp with the dent and his hand, which I have now watched shake at every important threshold of my life. Silence again. The expensive kind. My mother's voice arrives with a veneer that fools exactly no one. "Out of context," she says. "Your father, God rest him, hated conflict. He would have said anything to avoid making dinner awkward." "He said sisters," Blythe says, not loud. "He said ledger. He said keystone." She turns the phone toward me as if handing me a door. "This is not the venue," the clipboard woman announces, trying to perform authority while holding a pen that keeps clicking itself closed. "We have an active complaint and an order to suspend operations pending inspection. If you could step aside." "On what code are you calling immediate hazard?" Quinn asks, stepping forward like a man who knows the weight of clipboards in lives. He gestures at the entrance where Rafa and the deli guy have become a 2-man union. "Exits are clear. Capacity is posted. No open flames. No overloaded circuits. If you're citing 27,928, you're going to want to show me the meter readings. And if you're citing 28-103, I'm going to need to see the notice of violation." The woman blinks. Inspectors rarely expect the word meter to arrive from a man who ties his shoes with the same hands he carries strangers out of burning rooms with. "Ma'am," the older inspector says to me, voice attempting to be reasonable, "we can do this quick if you let us secure the centerpiece and the media associated with it." "The centerpiece," I say, looking at the empty space where my sentence should be.
has already been secured by someone else. I angle my chin toward my mother and her briefcase. You can ask who. Annika steps in. You can also ask whether any of this is actually about an exit sign or about a family that doesn't like that the room finally has light. The clipboard woman checks her paper as if hoping a new line will appear that says, actually, yes, this is about feelings. Shut it down. It doesn't. She looks to the older inspector who shrugs in a way that says he will enforce what the page tells him to, but he will not invent a page. My mother moves, the way a conductor moves when the orchestra has gotten chai. She opens the briefcase with a click designed for courtrooms. Inside, a VHS tape in a plastic sleeve, a stack of documents with tabs the color of compliance, a letter on law firm letterhead, Avery & Co. because of course, and a small black drive twin to the one that slept in my safe last night. You stole my USB? I say, not accusing. Inventory. My mother doesn't flinch. I reclaimed family property that had been put on public display without consent, she says, triumph stitched to the backing of propriety. Your grandmother didn't leave you authority to humiliate us. I leave me authority to hang what's true. You can call it humiliation if it helps you sleep. Silas clears his throat. It's softer than his earlier performative coughs, the sound of a man who has been to too many meetings and not enough mercy. Let's not turn this into a sidewalk trial. We all have lawyers. We all have lungs, I say. I'm using mine. Blythe holds her phone like a candle in a vigil. Dad kept a ledger, she says, again, as if repetition can build a raft. Annika steps closer to the briefcase. Is that the original VHS? She asks my mother, conversationally, as if they're two women comparing recipes. How convenient that your office had a digitized copy ready to distribute to inspectors. She glances at the clipboard woman's camera. Chain of custody is going to make a pretty song in court. The younger inspector looks at the tape as if it might bite. We're not here for that, he mutters. No, my mother says. You're here because a space without permits is dangerous. It sets a bad example. The only example being set, Delphine says, voice steadying itself as it walks, is that truth gets professionally inconvenient. She steps beside me and the crowd recalibrates to include her. People make room the way they do for strollers and grief. My mother finally looks at her. Really looks. I watch the calculation, the cataloging of features, the reaching for lineage as if it's a spice you can taste if you close your eyes. You're Delphine, she says, carefully. I am, Delphine says. I was. I will be. She nods at the briefcase. You can open it, but we might not like what crawls out. Gareth, who has been so quiet he nearly passes for a lamp, mutters, "This is indecent," and earns a look from Annika that could file cabinets. I take a breath. The gallery is behind me, the street in front, my family to the side, the city above like a ceiling that refuses to crack. Here's what we're going to do, I say, to no one and everyone. We're going to make a wall they can't take down. I walk to the glass and tape up the first copy of a document Annika printed in the small hours, a redacted email with a subject line that reads, Family List for Christmas, Attachment 0KB. The tape hisses. Physics applauds. Rafa is at my shoulder with more pages. Iris appears with blue painter's tape like a magician who has decided to pick a side. We cover the window with text and receipts and a photo of a shoulder that used to hold a person. People on the sidewalk start to read, the way people read menus and memorials, hungry and reverent. Someone starts a soft clap that grows and then dies, because clapping feels wrong and right at once. The inspectors watch, trying to decide whether tape constitutes an exit hazard. It doesn't. Quinn tells them so with the specificity of a man who knows the difference between a blocked door and a stubborn door. Stop, my mother says low. You're embarrassing yourself. That's the relief, I say, looking at her over my shoulder. It's finally myself I'm embarrassing. She lifts the tape from the briefcase and reveals a document on top, an affidavit signed by a notary who could not have understood what she was being asked to consecrate. Statement of Family Events, it reads. It is a narrative in bullet points. It turns birth into a meeting agenda. Annika leans in. Who drafted this? She asks. My lawyer, my mother says, chin a protractor. We will release it with the VHS if necessary. Release. As in press? As in control, she says, and the honesty of that surprises us both. Blythe steps between us, the peacemaker who finally chose a side. Mom, she says, Dad made a video for me. He wanted me to fix this when he couldn't. She lifts the phone again, scrolls. There's another part. My mother's face goes pallid with something that looks like fear wearing entitlement as a disguise. Don't, she says, but it's unironic now, almost human. Blythe hits play. My father again, same office, this time at night. The lamplight making a halo of dust. He looks tired, gentler, a man who has been practicing telling a truth into a camera and is finally ready to perform it for a person. Blythe, if you get to this part, it means you didn't turn off the first one. Good. He smiles, then sobers. I need you to hear me say the part your mother won't, and maybe can't. The crowd leans in. Even the clipboard pen stops clicking. Delphine wasn't a mistake, he says. She was a detour that scared us into curation. Your grandmother did what she could to keep the house we'd built. Your mother chose the wall because she's always been better with walls than with walls down. I chose the wall because I was a coward who loved you all in the easiest way he knew. I need you to decide if you want to keep loving us the easy way. He swallows. I hear the sound again and want to reach through time with water. You have always admired me when I did something inconvenient. Admire me now by disagreeing with me. He laughs, shakes his head. And if you need a breadcrumb, the bank is Westbury. The stamp on the correction form was forged. Annika inhales sharply. There it is, she says, half to the crowd, half to a judge she hasn't met yet. Material fact. My mother's voice is a crack that tried to be a bridge. Your father didn't understand the paperwork. He understood his pen, Annika says. Silas steps closer to my mother, says something low that sounds like advice trying to become mercy. For the first time since he entered my door, he looks smaller, like a man who knows he's been cast as a villain in a play that didn't need one. The older inspector clears his throat, struggling to find his place in a script that suddenly feels above his pay grade. We can come back tomorrow, he says to me quietly, if you make sure nothing's blocking excess. We didn't see it blocked. We saw paper. He gestures toward the glass wall now carrying our documents like a stained glass window that decided text was holier than saints. Thank you, I say, and mean it in ways that have nothing to do with tape. He nods, relieved, to be out of a family and back in a building. The clipboard woman looks irritated by his generosity, but files it under not my fight. She tucks her pen behind her ear like a baton and makes a note that won't be able to capture the way Delphine's hand is still in mine. Silas turns to me. I didn't send them, he says. The inspectors. I know. I do. The menace in the day wears my mother's perfume. He nods once in gratitude for being recognized as culpable in only the ways he admits. I have something for you, he adds, and produces from his inner pocket a small envelope embossed with Avery & Co. When you're ready. He holds it out to me, but stops short of my palm, waiting. Consent is a ceremony we're all learning late. I take it, slide it into my back pocket. The weight is nothing and everything. Blythe lifts her face, and she looks older in the way that happens when someone finally climbs out of a narrative and starts to walk on the street. I'm sorry,
she says to me. It is a small sentence that tries to pay a large bill. You can help hang the new one, I say. She nods, and then, in a move that will appear in my memory as a warm bruise, she turns to my mother. He said the stamp was forged. Tell me you didn't.
I did what I had to do, my mother says. And there it is, the naked creed of anyone who cannot yet distinguish between survival and dominance. She clutches the briefcase as if it were a child. Anika leans to me. We have enough to file for an immediate restraining order against further interference, she says. We can also file a complaint with the clerk's office. Forgery is not a word judges ignore, even when they try. Her mouth tilts, especially when they try. Rafa is taping up the last page, my statement about GILT, when a voice behind us says, "Excuse me," in the polite tone of people who are about to do something impolite. A man with a DSLR and a press badge holds it out toward me. "I'm Ken from the Ledger," he says. "We heard about a show where people were turning family into public interest. You want to comment?" I look at Anika. She nods once, imperceptible to anyone who has not learned her dialect. "Yes," I say. "I want to comment. I want to say that this is not a show about shame. It's a show about accuracy. Some of us were asked to live edited versions of ourselves, so a handful of dinner parties could be peaceful. I'd like to live unedited, even if it messes up dessert." Ken's mouth twitches, resisting liking me. "Spell your last name," he says, and I do. And then I spell Delphine's, because we decide in that breath that she will not be a rumor. "Okay," my mother says, loud enough to reclaim the center. She lifts the VHS. "If we're going to do this, we'll do it. We'll play the original tape, not the one your grandmother hid, not the version your father mumbled into his sweater, the one I saved." "You edited yours," Anika says. Not a question. My mother meets her eyes with an honesty that feels like a weapon. "Of course I did," she says. Blythe looks at her phone, then at me, then at the briefcase. "There's more on Dad's drive," she says, hushed. "A folder called Staircase. I didn't open it because I didn't." She swallows. "Do I?" "Not here," Anika says. "Not on the sidewalk, not without knowing what we're promising to the air." "Play mine," my mother says, ignoring Anika like you ignore the weather when you own an umbrella shop. She turns to the inspectors. "Can we use your camera?" "No," the older one says, surprised into a grin. "We inspect. We don't provide AV." He retreats a half step into neutrality he can explain to his supervisor. Rafa, who has seen more scrappy gigs than any of us, says, "I've got a VCR." We all look at him. He shrugs. "Prop house. It's in the van. We were going to use it in a window piece." He jogs to the curb and returns with a relic of black plastic and analog stubbornness. And a small monitor, because of course he has a small monitor. We set it on a milk crate turned altar. Cables snake like compromise. The crowd tightens in a respectful arc. The deli guy plugs an extension cord into his store and waves away my thanks. The city improvises when the official channels are allergic to truth. "Last chance to play something else," Anika murmurs in my ear. "Last chance to run," I say back, and we both smile because we know neither of us runs toward anything but fire. My mother straightens, presses her palm flat against the tape like a blessing given by someone who never learned to kneel, and slides it into the mouth of the VCR. The machine whirs, a sound from a century that believed in rewinding. She lifts the remote with ceremony. Blythe lifts her phone again, finger hovering over the other clip, the one I haven't heard, the one with a name like a warning. Staircase. 2 devices, 2 narratives, 1 crowd holding its breath the way people do in churches and courtrooms and delivery rooms. The frames in the window glitter under a new layer of meaning. Delphine squeezes my hand until my bones take notes. "On 3, my mother says, as if she still controls the numbers. 1, Blythe says, and for the first time I hear in her voice not harmony, but choice. 2, I say, and the city answers with a siren 3 blocks away that sounds like a prophecy. 3, my mother and I say together. The screens go bright. And from the far end of the block, over the white noise of the crowd,
Someone shouts my name like a verdict. The voice is male, strained, desperate. It yanks the air like a ripcord. Ione! I turn, instinct before sense. And the man running toward us is Quinn's captain from the firehouse. Helmet under his arm, face a map of smoke and emergency. He need to come, he gasps, stopping short. Hands on his knees. He points past me, up, the way men point when they have already tried everything else. He swallows. The crowd tilts. It's the storage facility, he says. Keystone. Unit 14. He swallows. The crowd tilts. It's on fire.
Do you know who I am? She asked. Something inside me, something that had been bracing since the projector's plug slid from the socket, lowered its shoulders. The question wasn't a claim, it was a request for permission. No, I said, but I think I'm supposed to. She exhaled a laugh that wasn't laughter. My neighbor says I apologize too much, so I won't start with that. She lifted the frame again, as if to remind herself it existed. I'm Delphine. The name rearranged the room. The frames watched. The pedestal made a point of being inert. I felt my mouth shape around the syllables the way you test a foreign word you suspect once belonged to you. Come in, I said, and my voice softened in the middle as if it had found a seat. She stepped past the threshold and looked at the grid like you look at a church when you haven't decided yet whether you believe. Her braid had come loose at the nape, strands the color of cedar falling like a small, kind mess. She had my grandmother's careful way of standing and none of my mother's refusal to fidget. She saw the blog, she said, eyes on the center frame. The one who wrote about the urgency. I work at the bookstore that shares the wall with his office. She glanced at me, uncertain. He talks loud. Bless him, I said. The rent needs loud. She smiled, grateful for the joke. Then her eyes went to the glass box, to the face-down squares like sleeping birds. I've seen that one. She tapped the Polaroid I had turned earlier. The picnic table, the date, my grandmother's looping D. I seen that one. In a box in our attic. My mom said it was nothing. She caught herself. My other mom. I had two. I still do. One likes to cook when she's nervous, and the other organizes drawers when she's happy, so dinner is labeled. I laughed. It came out like a hiccup, surprised and relieved to find humor still had a house key. You brought the frame, I said. She held it toward me like an offering. Maybe it belongs here, or maybe it's mine and I picked the wrong door. She swallowed. I've never been good at picking doors. I took the frame. It was cheap wood that had worked so hard it deserved a promotion. The school photo inside was 3rd grade, maybe 4th. Teeth mid-argument, a shirt with sailboats that would have embarrassed me, but looked fine on her. Taped to the back, the index card. Delphine, 1998, kept safe at Keystone, do not destroy. Keystone, I said aloud, and the word tugged at the hem of a memory. An afternoon in a rental office with a fan that made a terrible clicking sound, my grandmother speaking in a voice she reserved for bureaucracy. I must have been small because the counter had been a barricade of formica. The clerk had handed her a key on a blue plastic tag. She'd slipped it into her purse and squeezed my hand so tight my bones had taken notes. Delphine watched my face track the word. You know it, she said. Not a question. My grandmother's storage unit, I said slowly. A place that smelled like cardboard and bleach and intention. She nodded. I found the frame in a Rubbermaid tub with the word spring written on it like a season can be contained. The card was taped to the back. She touched the corner with a tenderness that made me want to trust her. This morning, my neighbor forwarded me that article and said, "Isn't this your situation?" I said no, then I read it and she gestured to the room. My body said yes. I set the frame on the pedestal next to the glass box and the USB sleeping inside the envelope. The 3 objects looked like a triptych of a small, loud prayer. Do you want to sit or stand or walk in circles until the floor learns our names? Walk, she said, please. We walked the grid.
I watched her face as she read the redacted text, as she stood in front of the cropped shoulder, as she hovered over the unsent note from the guidance counselor and whispered, "Oh," like a person recognizing the shape of their own restraint. When we reached the Polaroids under glass, she reached out but didn't touch. "I know these," she said. "Not those exact ones, but cousins." She looked at me. "Can I see the video?" "Not tonight," I said. "A judge signed a paper that turns light into contraband. I didn't try to make it a joke." She nodded, accepting a world that confines the visible. "Then, can you tell me?" I did. Not like a performance. Like inventory. She listened with her whole posture. When I finished, she sat on the floor with her back to the wall, pulled her braid over her shoulder, and looked up at me from the angle where most people are unflattering. She wasn't. She was real. My mom, Claire, the one organizing, she told me she started putting cash in envelopes in 2005 because a woman with gray hair came to the bookstore and asked her to. She bought 3 books, one on framing photographs, one on wills, one on plants that tolerate neglect, and paid in cash. When she left, a note fell out of the wills book. It said, "For Delphine's mother. Keep this for when she's old enough to ask, by E. Avery." Cleared check, taped to the note. Different handwriting on the envelope. Keystone. E. Avery, I repeated. My grandmother. A woman who believed in backbone and the correct temperature of butter. She used her initial when she wanted to be the kind of formal that counts as armor. Delphine nodded. Claire says she didn't understand much of it. She and my other mom, Alina, didn't know the woman beyond the bookstore. They didn't know if it was a scam or a blessing, so they did what trustworthy people do. They kept everything intact and waited for the right question. She laughed softly. I have not always been good at asking the right question. How old are you? I asked. I don't mean to be crass. The math matters. 26, she said. Born in June, or so says the certificate in my baby box, but the bracelet that was in the Rubbermaid says May. She shrugged. I figured hospitals make mistakes. Or moms do. Or everyone does, and you pick the story that doesn't ruin dinner. I sat beside her on the floor. The concrete leached cool through my jeans and felt like permission. My certificate says April. The video says June. I let the sentence sit between us like a chess piece we refused to move too quickly. She traced the seam where the wall met the floor. Do you hate them? She asked finally, for choosing a tidy frame over the truth. I don't know if hate is the word. I took a breath. I hate what it made me do to myself. The shrinking, the asking permission to exist in rooms I had the key to. I looked at her and found no performance there. Do you? She thought. I don't know them. Not the way you do. I love the people who fed me and held me and told me stories. I am curious about the people who stood in other rooms and picked dates. My phone buzzed. Anika, you alive? I sent back, breathing, we'll call in 5, with a person named Delphine. 3 dots appeared. Then, on my way back, do not sign anything, do not show anyone the video. I texted, copy, and brought my lawyer a coffee? Her reply, black, fierce. Delphine and I stood. I poured water because I didn't have coffee. Keystone, I said again. The card said, kept safe at Keystone. Do you know where? She reached into the tote and pulled out a small zip bag, the kind you use when you refuse to be surprised by weather. Inside, a brass key on a blue plastic tag, the word Keystone stamped on one side and a number on the other, 14. She gave me this an hour ago, she said. She kept it in the drawer with the extra batteries because that's where you keep things you can't afford to have fail. I held it. It was light and heavy all at once. We should go, I said. She glanced at the dark windows. Now? Now, I said. If we wait, the space will fill with all the reasons not to. I wrote a quick note for Iris. Went out. Back soon. Do not let the wall get lonely. And laid it under the glass box lid like a ridiculous will. We locked up. Orchard Street exhaled its nighttime perfumes. Fried dough, beer, cigarettes trying to pretend they are themselves. We walked to the corner where cabs debate their rates and found a driver who didn't mind two women clutching a frame like a relic. "Keystone Storage," I said. "The one in Williamsburg." The driver looked at us in the rear view. "Are you moving in or moving on?" "On," Delphine said. He nodded like he knew the difference. The storage facility sat under the BQE like a stubborn dream. Rows of orange doors, fluorescent lights that insisted on being awake. A front office with a partition that said either someone had once been angry or always might be. The night manager, Yusuf, as in according to his badge, looked up from a crossword and took us in without surprise. Some men know not to be surprised by women carrying keys at midnight. "Unit number?" he asked. Delphine slid the tag across the counter with a care that made me ache. 14. He entered it into a system that still wore the smell of dial-up. "Account holder is E. Avery." He flicked his eyes up for a second. "Auto pay for 17 years. No late fees. Respect." He looked at the clock on the wall. 12:11. "You listed on the contact?" Delphine shook her head. "I have the key and a note." She lifted the index card with my grandmother's handwriting like a script and placed it beside the tag. "From E. Avery." Yusuf examined the looped D, and something in his face softened, not because he read the name, but because he recognized the way ink tries to outlast people. He rubbed his jaw. "Policy."
"Let's do this in a room where we can sit," the new lawyer suggested, the way people suggest dessert when they want to change the subject and keep the bill ascending. "No," I said. "Here is fine." My mother's composure cracked at the corner, a hairline fracture you could miss if you didn't grow up mapping them. "If you take that ledger out of this bank," she said, deliberate as a metronome, "I will make sure your gallery never opens its doors again." "On what grounds?" Annika asked, delighted. I do love when vague threats put on legal shoes. "Safety," my mother said. "Code. Fire." She looked at Quinn. "You know how easy it is to shut a place down if someone complains the exits are blocked?" Quinn's jaw worked. "Don't," he said to her, and he turned red and then very pale in a way that meant he'd just seen the inside of a building he loved and the outside of a mother he would never recognize. Harris cleared his throat. "I'm going to have to ask everyone to lower their voices," he said, the way a kindergarten teacher speaks to parents after a recital. Annika touched my elbow. "We can make copies here," she murmured. "We can leave the originals. We can walk out with what we need and what they can't stop." My phone buzzed. Iris. "The city is here." Another buzz. Rafa. "2 inspectors. A man with a camera. They say immediate hazard. The deli guy is yelling at them in Italian and love." I looked up at my mother. She didn't smile. She didn't have to. 2 inspectors? Annika read over my shoulder. Her mouth went thin. That was fast. Silas took out his phone like a man preparing to stop a storm by calling it names. He said, "I didn't do that." "I did," my mother said. "I will not be judged in a room you built." Harris looked from face to face and stepped a half-inch back, the universal human measurement of wanting to be safe. I felt something old and obedient rise in me, the part that wanted to make peace, to apologize for making rooms complicated. I pressed my heel to the tile, grounded in a way yoga teachers try to teach rich women. I looked at Delphine. She nodded. The agreement was wordless and absolute. If they were going to strip the wall, we would hang the truth somewhere they couldn't reach. "Give me the ledger," I said to Annika. "Scan fast, then we go." Annika slid the pages under the bank's copier, hands efficient, like a pianist playing a difficult piece without looking. Harris produced a stamp from nowhere,
and notarized something that did not require notarizing in a gesture of solidarity. The lawyer with the coffin briefcase whispered to my mother. She stared straight ahead and pretended to listen. My phone buzzed again. Iris. They're taking frames down. Not all. The center one. The one with the sentence. I put myself in front of it. I tasted metal. I have to go, I said. We gathered the copies, slid the originals back into the box, placed the tape on top like a sleeping animal we promised to wake later, and closed the lid. Harris locked it with a ceremonial click that sounded like a promise and a threat. In the doorway, my mother stepped slightly to the side, an invitation that felt like a dare. She said, "Come home," and the words were too small for the building we were standing in. "We'll discuss this where it's not performative." "Home is a room where the wall is honest," I said. We moved past her. Silas's hand twitched as if to catch a sleeve and then thought better of it. He said my name without speaking. I kept walking. Outside, the city had decided it was morning whether we were ready or not. The air was loud with delivery trucks and outrage. We pushed through it, the four of us moving like a new fact. When we turned onto Orchard, I saw the crowd before I saw the sign. The crowd had the excitement of people who think they are about to witness something they will later say they hated, but secretly needed. In the middle of it, two men in vest vests, a woman with a clipboard, a camera slung around a neck that never borne weight. On our glass, a paper taped at a corner, official font, the kind that believes itself. Rafa stood like a statue at the entrance. Iris was inside, her small body aimed like ethics. The deli guy gestured with his apron that had become a flag. Quinn inhaled like oxygen had been replaced by justice, and he'd decided he preferred it. Delphine's hand found mine. And then I saw the center frame. Empty. The sentence gone. The velvet pedestal lid open like a mouth mid-scream. The USB gone. "Who has the drive?" I asked. No one answered because the answer was already walking out of the alley next to the gallery. Briefcase under his arm, a clipboard woman at his shoulder, my mother 10 paces behind him, and a look on her face I had seen exactly once before. On a day when she'd decided to rearrange the furniture while I was still sitting on it. She lifted her chin. "Your wall insists on telling a story," she said, voice steady. "Then we'll tell one too." Anika stepped in front of me, but I took a step around her. "What story?" I asked, and the question tasted like blood and light. "The one in this," my mother said, tapping the briefcase. "The original, not your edits." The briefcase clicked, and from behind the crowd, a voice I hadn't counted on, Blythe's, cut through. "Mom, don't." My mother didn't turn. "Stay out of this, Blythe." But Blythe was already pushing forward, face flushed, hair undone in a way that would have humiliated her last week. She held something in her hand, a phone, shaking. She looked at me, terrifyingly human. "Ione," she said, "I found a video on Dad's old hard drive. It's not what you think." I swallowed air that didn't feel cooperative. "What is it?" She lifted the phone. "It's not about you. It's about me."
I looked at Delphine. Her eyes were wet, but not drowned. The second envelope. For Delphine. I handed it to her. She shook her head. "Read it," she said. "Your voice got us here." I unfolded it. "My other girl," the words blurred and then sharpened. "Your existence is not a secret. Secrets are things we intend to hide. You were a confusion. Confusions grow into lies when we are too proud to admit them. I held you for 3 days and then sent you where love was steady, because mine was compromised by fear and neighbors and a trust that would have punished all of you for my courage. I will not forgive myself. I do not ask you to. I ask only that when you choose your wall, you hang what is true, even if it makes the room less symmetrical. There is a truth I did not write down because even my handwriting trembled. One father signed, the other did not. The one who signed learned to love by staying. The one who did not knew only how to leave rooms before the lightning started. The tape will tell you the rest if you insist. The notebook is a ledger. It lists every time money made a decision. If you hate me with the certainty of weather. If you don't, teach me how to be forgiven from wherever I am. E. We were quiet. Air re-entered the vault like a guest allowed back after a polite exile. Annika reached for the leather notebook and opened to the first page. Columns, dates, amounts. My grandmother's account of the trust funds moving like water, to mortgage payments, to household needs, to Blythe's orthodontist, to Quinn's baseball fees, to annual donations for Delphine, with a line item, cash via bookstore, Claire, do not write last name. She fed you through the back door, Annika said, reverent. She made the trust pay you without letting the trust know it had. Delphine laughed, and it broke in the middle in a way that made me want to hold the world's face and say, be gentle. Claire used to say, your scholarship fairy is punctual. I used to roll my eyes. I'm an idiot. You were a child, Annika said. Children are allowed to misunderstand miracles. I lifted the VHS tape, the plastic case cold. We can digitize this. Not today. Not here. But soon. A shadow in the doorway. Harris, clearing his throat with librarian delicacy. I'm sorry. There's someone at the front insisting she is authorized to be here. She has a key. She is insistent in the way of people who have practiced insisting. My mouth went dry. My mother, I said. It wasn't a question. Harris's polite smile apologized for the existence of mothers. She brought a gentleman and a lawyer with a briefcase like a coffin. He hesitated, then added, she said to tell you, close the box and come out here, Ione. We are not doing this underground. He looked mildly pleased at his own mutiny in delivering message with opinion attached. Annika closed the notebook with 2 fingers, precise. We don't have to open the door until we're ready. The vault is ours for 12 minutes by policy. Will 12 minutes change anything? Delphine asked. Not naive, honest. It will change us, I said. We worked quickly. Annika photographed the documents, page by page, with a phone that thought it was a scanner. She spoke softly as she worked, a running jurisprudence lullaby. Truth is a defense. Public interest. They made this public the minute they tried to make it a law. Chain of custody. Redaction. Consent. Witnesses. Harris is a good witness. Harris at the door straightened as if knighted. I held the ledger. I held the letters. I held the key shapes made by words that had finally chosen to be honest. My hands were steady. For once, it felt like grace and not dissociation. A knock at the vault door. Not loud. An event, anyway. Ione. My mother's voice, muffled by metal, honed by years of insisting rooms behave. Open this door. We will ruin ourselves if you don't. That depends on your definition of ruin, Annika murmured. Delphine touched my arm. Do you want me with you? She asked. No theatrics, just the kind of offer that makes the word sister a verb. Yes, I said. Please. I slid the ledger and letters back into the box. We left the tape inside. We were not going to give my mother the theater she wanted. I closed the lid and nodded to Harris. He looked at us like men who look at women who have already done the brave part and are about to do the visible part. He opened the vault door. The lobby was a different kind of quiet.
My mother stood near the desk, posture immaculate, coat folded over her arm like a trophy she didn't want. Beside her, Silas, jaw uncompromised, his tie a polite war. The man with the charcoal suit from last night had multiplied. This one had a thinner briefcase and the expression of a person who anticipates billable hours. Gareth stood behind them, looking like he'd wandered into the wrong church. My mother's eyes went from my face to Delphine's and softened without permission. It startled her. She pulled the softness back so fast the air stung. "Close the box," she said. "Whatever you think you found, you don't understand it." "We understand enough," I said. "Enough to stop pretending." Silas stepped forward. He lowered his voice as if he could make this private by volume. "Ione," he said. "Please." Annika stepped into the space he thought he owned. "We're not moving another inch until you state your intention on the record. If your lawyer wants to advise you to do otherwise, I won't mind at all." The new lawyer cleared his throat like a paper cut. "We're here to secure the contents of a family deposit box pending adjudication, to prevent further unauthorized dissemination." He looked at Harris as if expecting him to help. Harris arranged his features into a high Renaissance painting of neutrality. "This box belongs to a trust," Annika said, cheerful as a guillotine. "We are two of its beneficiaries and counsel. If you'd like to seek an order, find a judge. Until then, you are posters without tape." "My mother left us a map," I said to my mother. "She wanted us to find this. She left me a mess, and I handled it." She gestured to Silas without looking at him. "We handled it." Handled is a strange word for removed. My mother looked at her as if trying to inhale her. "You must be—" She put her hand to her throat, caught herself, and lowered it. "You must be Delphine." "I must," Delphine said. "And I must be older by 2 hours. The ledger says so." Silas's mouth tightened. His eyes went to the ledger box as if it were a dog he wanted to pet and feared. He said, "I'm not here to fight you." And for the first time since he walked into my gallery, I believed him. "I'm here to keep you from doing something you can't undo." "That's what you did 27 years ago," I said, with dates and rooms. He flinched. "Minute, private." "Yes," he said, "and I'm sorry." The apology landed in the lobby like a small, bright bird that wasn't sure if the windows were real. Behind us, the vault door hummed as it began its scheduled closing. Harris checked his watch with the serenity of a man who trusts clocks more than chaos.
Delphine stepped in close behind me. We didn't turn on the overhead strip. We let the flashlight do its cone of truth. On the top shelf, a banker's box labeled with my grandmother's tidy capitals. Index. Under that, A12, certificates. B07, photos, originals. B08, photos, copies. C03, legal, trust, keystone. D02, personal, letters. "Of course she made an index," I whispered, throat thick with affection for a woman who had catalogued grief as if it were a stamp collection. Delphine lifted the index box. Inside, a file folder with color-coded tabs, a typed sheet with the contents of the unit, and, taped to the inside lid, a Polaroid of my grandmother standing in front of this very unit, chin up, defiant as a librarian on a bad day. On the back of the Polaroid, "If you are here without me, be kind to each other." We started with A12, certificates. Inside, sleeves of documents, some crisp, some softened by years of being asked to prove something. There were 2 birth certificates, the kinds with seals that like to shimmer when you tilt them. One bore my name, Ione Marsh, dated June, a corner curled where tape had once kept it in place. The other, Delphine, no middle name listed, dated May. The hospital names matched. The times were 2 hours apart. "What does that mean?" Delphine asked, eyes not leaving the lines. "That someone printed the truth once," I said, "before they ironed it." Under those, a single sheet. a city clerk request for amendment. The box ticked for correction of typographical error. The line read, date of birth. The new date in a hand I recognized as my mother's, the justification typed, alignment with medical record. Delphine touched the line where the clerk had stamped received. She said, they made a typo. She said it gently, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping child. I opened C03, Trust, Keystone. My grandmother's pen again, more aggressive here, as if the page had needed to be convinced. A trust agreement. Keystone Family Trust, established 1998, naming beneficiaries by description rather than name, as in the household children of record. The words sat there smug in their legality. An addendum. Distributions contingent upon family alignment. My grandmother underlined the phrase and wrote in the margin, insulting. Below, a bank deposit box key taped to a card, Westbury Savings, box 312. Next to it, my grandmother's note, if you must open this, open it with a lawyer. I closed my eyes and saw Annika's text, on my way back, and pictured her in black, fierce like coffee that believes in something. We moved to D02, letters. The top envelope, for Delphine, the script softened by intention. Delphine looked at me as if asking for permission to breathe. I said, open it. It has your name. Her fingers trembled only a little. Inside, 3 pages of my grandmother's handwriting, blue ink, the loops steady. Delphine read aloud, and her voice braided with my grandmother's until I couldn't tell which was guiding which. My dear Delphine, if this finds you, then either I was brave, or I was punished for not being brave sooner. I am sorry for the ways we chose tidiness over courage. I believed keeping things neat would keep you safe. I may have been wrong. You exist because of impossible love and unforgivable fear. Both are true. I did what I could. I kept the originals. I fed the trust with rules and side doors. I asked strangers to hold cash because some things are safer in the hands of people who want nothing from you. If you go to Westbury, bring someone who likes to argue more than to win. If you find your sister, tell her I am proud of the way she looks at light. If you do not want any of this, you can leave it here, shut the door, and go home. You will still be loved. E. Delphine folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her chest for a breath. She handed it to me, and I felt a piece of my grandmother's apology warm through the paper and into bone. Behind us, footsteps in the corridor. We stilled. The flashlight's cone quivered. Ione? A male voice, familiar at the edges. Quinn. I exhaled a laugh that expected to be fear. Back here, I called. He appeared in the doorway, too broad for the frame, smelling like winter and laundry detergent. I figured you'd come here, he said. Mom called Claire. He lifted a hand when I blinked. Delphine's Claire. We know each other. The town is a very small country. He leaned against the door, eyes scanning the boxes with firefighter triage. She called to ask if you should be in a storage unit at midnight. I said if anyone should, it's you. You came to help? I asked. He said, I came to stand between you and whomever else is on their way. Also to carry things. That's my primary skill set. He glanced at Delphine. Hi, I'm Quinn. I've always wanted a new sister and I didn't realize it until 10 minutes ago. Delphine's mouth twitched. Hi, she said. I've always wanted a brother who says the exact right thing at the exact right time. He nodded as if they'd struck a deal. Do we have a plan? I said, get these to the gallery, call Annika, and decide whether to go to Westbury tonight or in the morning. The bank is not open at 1 a.m., even in New York, Quinn said. Then we sleep on the floor of my gallery like teenagers who broke into a chapel to pray and forgot to leave. We loaded what we could into Quinn's truck, A12, C03, D02, leaving the boxes of photos for morning, because greed is the cousin of mistakes. Yusuf watched us with the benevolent suspicion of a man who knows the difference between burglary and retrieval. He lifted a hand as we left. If anyone asks, I never saw you. If no one asks, I saw you and wished you good luck.
Back at Gilt, we turned on only the front lights. The frames looked like a town lit for a parade. We spread the boxes on the floor. Quinn made a nest out of packing blankets and my sweatshirt and called it a couch. Delphine curled against a stack of legal documents as if they were reliable furniture. I sat with my back against the pedestal and tried to make my lungs obey physics. At 2:30 a.m., Annika arrived, hair in a knot that meant she had untied knots for other people all day. She took in the scene without commentary, the way surgeons do when they find a family in a waiting room asleep in artful misery. She said, "You couldn't wait until morning." I said, "Morning would have invented 9 reasons to be civilized." She crouched by C03 and scanned. Keystone, Family Trust. Beneficiaries, household children of record. Clever and cruel. She lifted the tape to the bank key and slid it free. She said, "We go to Westbury at opening. We bring IDs, the letter, and our spines." She looked at Delphine. She said, "You're Delphine." Not asking. "I am," Delphine said. "I think. I've been Del for a long time. I can be both." Annika smiled. Both is a superpower. We slept badly and a little, our bodies keeping vigil as in they borrowed rest. I woke at dawn to the sound of the city remembering itself. Garbage trucks, a bicycle bell, laughter that hadn't been earned and didn't need to be. I made coffee in the electric kettle I keep for emergencies of morale. We were quiet while we drank, not out of reverence, but because words needed to lace their shoes. At 8 p.m., we were at Westbury Savings, a bank that looked like it had been designed to reassure grandmothers and extort poets. The manager's nameplate said Harris. He had the demeanor of a man who refused to be hurried and the hands of someone who liked his plant houses too much. "We're here to access a deposit box," Annika said with the confidence of thrown light. She placed the trust documents and my grandmother's letter and the key on the counter. "Our authorization is literal and moral." Harris adjusted his glasses as if they, too, needed to prepare. He examined the papers, the key, the letters looped D. He made a noise I've only ever heard in museums, the sound people make when they decide to allow beauty to complicate their rules. He said, "Box 312. Registered to Keystone Family Trust. Authorized signatories E. Avery and R. Marsh." He looked up. "Mrs. Marsh is deceased?" "Yes," I said, "and Mrs. Avery." Harris nodded, a small bow to absence. "Secondary access listed as household children of record with joint signature of counsel." He looked at Annika's card. "Counsel is here." He slid a ledger across the counter. "Sign, all 3 of you." "All 3?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "It says children, plural. I am an obeyer of plurals." We signed. He led us through the vault door, a thick circle that swung like a planet letting in a moon. The room beyond smelled faintly of metal and old paper, and the particular kind of quiet that can be counted. Harris slid the inner key in and turned it. He said, "I'll give you privacy. Press the button if you need me. It illuminates a light that makes me feel like a bat signal." He smiled at his own joke, which made me like him. He set the long, slim box on a small table and left. We looked at each other as if we should sing before doing something that felt like sacrilege. Annika nodded at me. She said, "Open it. You're the curator."